Top Game Management CEO Tyson Chartier is back, and there is a lot to talk about here in the MMA world, or maybe not a lot to talk about, depending on how you want to look at it. How you doing, Tyson?
Good, man. How you doing, buddy?
Not bad at all. Now, the last time that I spoke to you, you were down at the Mohegan Sun, getting ready to be in the corner of a couple of your elite fighters, Nate Andrews and Justin Sumter, and then that was pulled right out from underneath you. I mean, we're in unprecedented territory, not just in MMA, but in sports in general. How are you and the fighters you represent handling this?
Everybody seems to be handling it pretty, professionally. I don't hear a lot of griping or, it is what it is. Like it's not in our control. And I always tell the fighters, from the littlest problems to the biggest problems like these is like the only thing we can do is focus on what we can control. And we can't control what the government regulations do or how the UFC or Bellator or whoever reacts to these things or whether they do or don't cancel a card. Like all that's out of our control. The only thing we can control is being ready for the date we're supposed to fight. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The rest will kind of work itself out. But yeah, definitely some trying times. We're putting that system to the test right now with these extreme measures that are going on publicly.
How are you handling it just for yourself as far as your own health and safety and your family? I know you have kids. Are you taking extra precautions as far as going out into the public? Are you just trying to stay at home as much as possible? What are you trying to do?
For the most part, I'm home most of the day, and then it's just trying to get some morning sessions in with Calvin because as of right now, he's still fighting in a month. But even doing that safe, like make sure we wash our hands a lot. And every time I come home, my wife's like, wash your hands, change your clothes, and trying to be as safe as we can be, but also finding that happy medium between getting Calvin ready for the biggest, you say the biggest fight of his life right now. The next one's always the biggest one, right? So trying to get Calvin ready for a fight, but also be responsible, as a dad and a husband, and trying to balance all that out and take calculated risks and not be stupid.
Yeah. What does your gut tell you as far as how long this whole thing is going to last? I mean, you hear some people saying it's going to go all the way until June, maybe even July. Do you anticipate that maybe at least the MMA world? I mean, you've seen Dana White and the UFC. They've done everything they can possibly to make fights happen, and then the government steps in and basically puts the kibosh on, canceling the next or postponing the next 3 events. When do you think life's going to get back to normal?
I think once. It's just a guess at this point, like,
Right.
listening to the experts and they're all saying different things. So, I mean, obviously I hope as quickly as possible, as little damage as possible to people's, health and wellness. But, I don't know how long we can sustain this in terms of financially. There's a lot of people that are, out of jobs and trying to figure out how to make ends meet. It's very stressful for a lot of people. So obviously being optimistic, I'm hoping this blows over in a few weeks and, you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel and we have a good plan of how to handle this. Obviously that's way above our pay grade. There's, a lot of smart people putting their heads together, figuring out the best way to do that. And I think we just have to keep trying to take the advice that, as best we can and try to do our part, but it's hard to take that advice 100% when we're also trying to get ready for a fight. So it's a little bit of a weird being a hypochondriac and contradicting exactly everything I'm saying, but it's tough. I don't know, man. I hope it's just quick. I would hope by this, May and June, we're back to regular schedule. Maybe at the beginning when they first start out, they lift that ban of 10 people and make it back to 250 or something. And you can start doing shows with closed audience and stuff like that. But who knows, man? I mean, like I said, that's way above our pay grade.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you and your family, do you guys have enough toilet paper and hand sanitizer to get you through?
My wife is a boss. She went out and found toilet paper this morning. She brought back. She thinks she's like a conquering hero. Like she's such a provider now because she found toilet paper. But no, when I was in Korea for the December card in Korea with Mike Rodriguez, we had bidets and Joe was just raving about the bidet all week. Joe was on how nice it was, and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. I mean, heated seat and so that was what my wife got me for Christmas. We actually got a bidet. So we're not in the worst situation if we run out of toilet paper and have to start using that instead of toilet paper. But yeah, I mean, it is crazy the things that you're seeing. But fortunately, we do have toilet paper. We do have food. We're stocked up on diapers and wipes and soap. So, I mean, the essentials are there. It's just hopefully we don't lose power and we don't have water.
Yeah, I can tell you for me personally, I mean, I haven't been going out and hoarding or buying more than I should, but it breaks my heart when I look on social media or wherever and I see like a picture of an old person that, doesn't get around that well and is at a grocery store or at a Walmart and they're basically stuck like, looking at empty shelves trying to get what they need to get by. If hypothetically speaking, if this was to get worse and people were like savages going out to these grocery stores and whatnot, how do you think people would actually react when it comes to getting the stuff that they need? Because I'm even seeing people now acting crazy. Just, I mean, not being nice to one another about just sharing and making sure everyone has enough to get by.
Yeah, man, I hope it doesn't get to that because you see a lot of movies and that never ends well. Ideally, you want to try to make sure everybody's doing their part to take care of your neighbors and your friends, and especially the elderly. I know some of the grocery stores around here are doing like from 6 to 7:30 in the morning. It's only 60 plus, I think. So they're
Yeah.
giving them kind of a chance to get first dibs on that stuff. And I think the older people are probably a little bit more responsible. They're not going to go and buy all the toilet paper. They're going to get what they need, and they're a little wiser than we are. So I think they're giving them a chance to go in there, not only to avoid the crowds, but then also from a health standpoint, not have to be around a bunch of other people because they do have essential stuff that they probably need to purchase. So I'm glad that the grocery stores around here are doing that at least.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are some around my neck of the woods doing the same thing. So hopefully that continues until this thing just blows over and is a thing in the past. Let's get back to MMA and talk about what's going on in your world. Now, obviously, you got Calvin. His fight's a month away. One of your good buddies, Tony Martin, he's fighting on the 25th at the end of next month. But then you got guys that I mentioned earlier, like Justin Sumter and Nate Andrews, who were weighing in, who were getting ready to fight, and then boom, it's canceled, and they have to go back to and do whatever they're doing in their normal lives now. How are those two guys dealing? Like, what is their mental state right now? I mean, they had to have been pretty upset.
They're upset, but obviously, once you get to that level, there's a big part of your reason for fighting is you are doing it for the money. It's a source of income. And fortunately, Bellator was like, they did the right thing. I think we were supposed to check in at 4:30, and at 1:15 we found out the show was canceled on fight day. And both those guys got their show and win, which kudos to Bellator for doing that. And so both those guys, like, it was a painful blow to not fight, but it didn't cost you money. So that's always like helps absorb it a little bit. So I think those two guys, like, they got a consolation prize, they got their show and win, but they didn't get to fight. So they seem pretty like not as bummed as they would have been had they only gotten their show money or none at all. So I think that helped a lot. That helped their outlook. And now both of them said the same thing. They called me the next day and they're like, hey, can we try to get on the CES card? One was April 24th and the other one in Connecticut, 5/15. So they were both trying to just bounce right back and get back in there so they don't waste a whole fight camp. So they both seem pretty optimistic. They handled it well. They're both professionals. I mean, obviously they are professionals. They both fought at the highest levels. So they had a good outlook on it and they handled it well. And, they handled it in a manner that I would try to coach the younger fighters to handle it. It's like, listen, like, you can't be mad at anybody here. It is what it is. Nobody's fault. And, there's people way smarter than us making these decisions. And I'm sure they had a reason for why they canceled it at the last minute. And, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's great that they did give them their show money. That's huge, and it makes a big difference. I'm sure, like you said earlier, it let them, I guess, kind of leave with a little bit of peace and happiness. Even though they didn't get to fight, they did get paid for their show purse. So that is good. Let's talk a little bit about Nate because he lost that last one again to Wade. Where's he at now? What is his future going to be? What do you expect him to be doing? Do you think he's going to climb the ranks and try to get another shot at PFL? Is UFC an option, or is he going to be fighting regionally?
So his age is a little bit of a hindrance for the UFC. He's 35 now, so it's a little tough because there's younger kids with similar records that they could probably invest in a lot more and have more time with. I mean, that's the argument. I know he could go in the UFC right now and perform and do really well. I mean, he just beat Rashid Magomedov, who's 5-1 in the UFC and is a beast. And, Nate beat him. It's just I guess you could say if he had like a kryptonite of a matchup, and it's not saying that he can't win these fights, but Chris Wade is the type of guy that needs to come in and fight Nate Andrews. That's the tough fight for him, is a pressure wrestler who's not really trying to, he's not really looking to finish the fight or engage heavily in the feet. He just wants to pressure you, sneak out rounds, which was smart by him because that's how you have to beat Nate with his skill set. So, Nate, unfortunately, he lost to him twice. It was just the way it lined up in the playoffs, but then he beat a guy that had way more success than he did in the UFC. So it just showed where he's at. Unfortunately, the way the cookie crumbled at the end of the day was, he had to fight Wade twice, and the second one was only 2 rounds. So the playoffs was 1 round, right? It was 2 rounds. 2 rounds. Yeah, 2 rounds. Yeah, so he lost him in a 2-round decision out there in Vegas, and I thought for sure they were going to bring him back. I was like, he's one of the only guys that speaks English in the division. He's the only guy that talked a little bit of, hyped a little bit of the fights during the playoffs because, PFL asked him to, like, hey, can you hype this fight a little bit? So he went out of his comfort zone, did what he did to do. They're putting out his trash talking all over ESPN, and then he went out there, and it wasn't like he was, like, overwhelmed or anything. He's competitive. He lost the same guy twice, the guy that, is their poster boy. And he's the only one that really wants to keep fights standing. He's not out there trying to, like, shoot a bunch of takedowns. He's really trying to, like, knock people out. So I was pretty surprised that they didn't bring him back, but I guess they, 2/3 of the roster got hacked and they're bringing in some new faces and stuff. So unfortunately, we weren't part of the plan moving forward. But I think moving forward with him is, he was really looking forward to this Killers Moto fight because it's a big, the kid's tough. He fought for an LFA title, 12-1 record. Nate goes and finishes him. It's like, it puts us in a good spot with Bellator. Like, he can compete with those guys at the top of that division, whether it be, Henderson or Chandler or any of those guys. So I think it's a fresh face. You're starting to see a lot of those guys keep recirculating and fighting each other again because they don't have, a lot of brand new talent that's, being successful that makes sense to fight those guys next. And I think Nate has the skill set to do it. We just need the opportunity.
Yeah, well, I'll be looking forward to seeing him step back into the cage soon. Hopefully it is Bellator. I think that probably would make the most sense for him moving forward. As far as Justin goes, he had that loss on Contender Series. What do you think his next step is? Obviously, he had that fight for Bellator, but what do you envision him doing here in the next year or two?
I think he's just going to get busy. He had a little bit of an injury after when he went on Bellator. He had hand surgery himself a little bit. Then he went on the Contender Series, and he underperformed. He'll admit he underperformed, and he didn't perform to his potential, and he came away with a loss. And then he had a little bit of a layoff, and we were going to get back in there, and it didn't happen. So now we need to get back to work. We need to get busy. We just need to string together a few wins and see where things fall. But right now, the mission number one is let's go get a couple wins. It's cool that CES is also doing shows in Connecticut. Bellator comes a couple times a year. I know he likes fighting for both those guys, so he's got opportunities in front of him right now. Obviously, with the Corona stuff, who knows when those are going to be? But it shouldn't be too hard to keep him busy fighting in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had a lot of guys that were on the CES Cage Titans cards that were canceled and rescheduled here. Is that? I mean, I guess it's tough to tell. I mean, we're still just guessing at this point, but do you anticipate the same matchups for the fighters that you represent for those two promotions?
The idea is we try to keep as many of the matchups as we can, and I know CES, that's their goal, and Pulver, same goal as his. Try to keep the card together because it's less work for everybody. We've already agreed to purses, we've already agreed to contracts, they've been signed, they're in. Now we just need a new date. That's the low-hanging fruit for the promoter and all the fighters. So that'd be the goal. Like, we had some really good fights coming up. Mitch was going to have a good fight on Cage Titans. And then right after that, we had, I think, 5 of the 6 main card fights on CES were my guys, which we were really happy about. We liked all the fights. They were all good names. They all made sense for where the guys were at respectively in their careers. And hopefully we can keep that card together and just move on, get those wins, and then move on to the next card.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, Rocco is fighting on the 25th of next month. On that same card is Peter Barrett, who you represent, a really exciting, interesting fighter here in the New England area. How is Pete looking? And, I mean, I got to imagine he must be over the moon, excited and anxious just to get in there and make his debut.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for that kid. It's, he had a long, windy route to get to the UFC, and, he got there. He's a little older. He had some personal issues with, some deaths in the family and stuff. And he went through some rocky times, but he persevered. He kept plugging away, and and he got that tough win in Vegas, and he got a contract, and then he was the last one from last season to get booked for this season. So he's been just kind of waiting, and then finally gets booked. And every fighter, I don't care if you're 20 or 32, you dream of making that walk. You know, you dream of it. You dream of your song playing, your family being there. You make that walk. You get that UFC experience, and it just stinks that he's making his UFC debut supposedly on April 25th in Nebraska. But let's say that card does happen. It's probably not happening in Nebraska, and it's not going to be in front of fans. So it's, it stinks for kids like that, and then you got like just everybody, obviously everybody's affected by this. Walt Harris is supposed to be the main event of a card, a couple weeks before that. Everybody dreams of the first main event, and he's not going to get to make a walk in front of a crowd. The fight got canceled, it's going to get postponed or whatever. Like, it just stinks. I feel for a lot of these guys, but someone like Peter Barrett, he's just waiting for the opportunity. I mean, that kid, he comes out and he fights every single fight. He goes balls to the wall. He's got like a Chris Lieben style where he's just going to come out and you're going to get in a fight. Even if you beat him, you're going to know you got in a fight. And there's no way around it. So I think this fight that he has is like perfectly tailored for his style. It's like, kid doesn't deal well with pressure. Pete loves pressure. And the kid, kind of strikes. He's willing to stand with some people, but Pete wants you to stand with him. So it's, and he's not like he's a power wrestler, so he's not just going to throw Pete around the cage or anything. So it makes a really exciting fight. And on paper, it's like when we got the matchup, we were really excited about it. It's a very, very winnable fight. Like, in my eyes, I think we should be the favorite on paper. I don't know what Vegas is saying, but I'm excited for him to get there. Hopefully he gets that opportunity, and even better if he can get it in front of some fans. Because I want him to have that experience of like making that walk and looking up and hearing the cheers and getting to do that speech with, Anik or whoever it is on the mic after, and getting that moment. Because even if you only get it once, no one can take that from you.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I hope you're right, because he has been through a hell of a lot, and he deserves it. So hopefully he does get that chance at some point here soon. I got to ask you, too, about Rocco Martin. How good can he be? He's an amazing interview. He's so funny. He's charismatic, and he just seems to be putting it together now. He had that loss to Maya, but he just seems to be kind of really coming into his own. How good can he be? How far can he climb in the welterweight rankings?
Tony Martin, healthy and mentally there, can beat anybody in the world right now. And we know that. Like the Maya fight, and he's not going to come out and make excuses, but I was in the Airbnb with him that whole week because and he was going through some personal stuff then. And he doesn't share that publicly, and I won't get into details, but he was not in a good place mentally. Like, I was with him the whole week for that fight, and he was not focused on the fight. He was dealing with a lot of, like, say, out of the gym stuff, and it just, unfortunately, it kind of rolled over in the fight. He fought a little flat, but obviously fighting Damian Maya, and he has the ability to pull you into that style of a fight, and unfortunately, it didn't go Tony's way that night, but Tony can beat anybody, man. He trained with us for years in Boston. Me and him became good friends, and we opened up a gym together in Minnesota with Brock Larson. And, he's like a brother to me. I was fortunate enough I got to corner him again in Moscow and got to win. And I always joke with him that I'm his head coach now, and he has to listen to whatever I say. But I'll be cornering him again in Nebraska. So it's just good to he just can beat anybody, man. Like, we love this matchup for him, David Zawada. It's like I just don't see where this kid can beat Tony. I think Tony's a top 10 fighter that no one knows about, and he goes out and gets this big win. I think he's going to put him in a good place to, get a new contract, get a good name to fight. And I think he just needs that marquee win,
Yeah.
He go get this finish. I really think he should finish this kid early. Get through this fight, get a new contract, and hopefully we get like a good name to fight, and he can show that like he is a contender in the division.
Can't wait to see that fight. Hopefully that card stays intact and all of this blows over by then. Before we talk about Calvin here, I got to ask you kind of an off-the-wall type of question. Let's just say that you and all your boys, all the fighters here that everyone knows about in the New England area, you guys all go out and you're partying, maybe having a couple of adult beverages. Who's the wildest one? Who's the one that's going to –
Rico Deshulo. It's not even a question. Rico Deshulo. Yeah, no, you don't want to get in a street fight with Rico Deshulo. He's got he hits the hardest. He's skinny, right? Like, I used to live with Rico back when he first made street. We lived together for about a year and a half. And Rico can, he's not like a degenerate or anything like that. It's just that like if he thinks you're messing with one of his buddies, like it's on right then, and he has no problem. But yeah, he's the guy you want to have with you to get your back. And other than that, let's take Rebello or Big John just because they look scary.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I like it. That's funny. And there's so many guys that you have that you represent that are fighters that are well known, that are interesting. They're characters. Like Peter Barrett, for example. That was maybe who I was thinking of. Maybe he might get a little wild and crazy. But Rico, I like that.
Yeah. Now Peter Barrett is like more than meets the eye. Like on social media, if people have never met Pete, they look at his social media and they're like, that kid's crazy. Is he like, and what's his deal? I was like, dude, he's one of the most loyal, like honest kids you'll ever meet. He's not controversial. He's like super respectful, super nice, very professional. It doesn't, like you wouldn't look at his social media and gather that from it, but he's not looking to get into trouble. He's a bartender. He's not getting in fights at the bar or anything like that. He's acting like an adult now. So
yeah, gotcha. Well, I understand you just got done running hill sprints with Calvin Cater. How did that go?
He lapped me 3 times, but I didn't quit. We did it's like the reservoir in Lawrence, Mass. So we did a few laps around the top just to warm up, and then we did 10, and then we finished with another lap. But yeah, I think he did 10 and the time I did 7, so then he cheered me on for the last 3. But it was good, man. It's just good to be outside. We practiced our social distancing, so we didn't run right next. That's why I let him lap me, because I didn't want him to be
yeah.
Right? So yeah, that was good, man. He's in a good place mentally. He's if there's someone on the roster that, there's really 2 guys that come to mind is Rob Font and Calvin Cater. Like those are 2 of the most mentally strong fighters that I've ever been around, whether I work with you or not. Like they deal with adversity well. They deal with uncertainty well. They really do like trust in the team that's around them. And they just say like, when I told Calvin that he wasn't fighting to beat in Boston, I was like, listen, we don't know what's going to happen. He bit me on the shoulder and then just said, Tyson, just tell me when I'm fighting. He's like, I'll just keep training. And like, that's what you want. You want like a guy that's be able to block out all of the BS and all the noise and just say like, listen, as of right now, I'm fighting on the 18th. Let's get ready. Like who's with me, and that's where he's at. So, and Rob Font's the same way, and I think those 2 feed off each other. And I think they're setting a good example for all the young fighters around this area of how to be successful just from the mental side.
It's funny you say that, because when you say young fighters setting an example, I see Tom Pagliarulo basically right with those guys a lot of posts and whatnot. Tell me a little bit about Tom's evolution and just how good maybe he can be. Is he one of those guys that we can see in kind of like the vein of like a Calvin or Rob here in the next few years?
He's doing all the right things. He's got Calvin. Rob's his head coach, so Rob puts his camp around him and brings in certain people to work with him. He sets up his training and he does all a lot of private sessions with Rob, a lot of one-on-ones, the group sessions with like Rob's other gyms that he works with, and me, Rob, Calvin. He gets in with the group. He's training with the cartel, and he's asking the right questions. He's watching Calvin hit mitts and then asking the why. Like why is he doing this? Why do you guys want to do that? So he's trying to figure out like the business side of the fighting in terms of like the game planning and why we're doing certain things, why we're not doing certain things. Then you send him videos to watch, he'll watch them. He's been Rob's been extremely obviously a great coach to him, but he's also been like a fantastic mentor to him. So Tom's just soaking it all up. He's in a place we all wish we were when we were his age. He's got 2 top 10 fighters, a top 10 fighter as his head coach and another top 10 fighter as his main training partner. And, and then whenever he asks me, I help, and I always defer to Rob. He's like, hey, what are we doing? He just texted me and said, we're sparring tomorrow. And I'm just like, I always defer to Rob with everything. Like, Rob's your coach. I'm part of your team. So we let Rob take the lead on that. And, he's a great wrestler who's winning by knockout now. That's always scary. They always say once the wrestlers start knocking people out, like, what do? You just don't take the fight. So
yeah. No, he clearly looks like someone to keep your eyes on, an up and comer that really could make a huge splash in the UFC whenever that time comes. I got one last question for you, Tyson, before I let you go here today. I understand that you do have a member of your team that potentially is on a Contender Series bout in July, and you haven't announced it yet. Is it someone that I know well, or can you give me like a hint?
I think they already post it on MMA Junkie. I think they were saying like the matchups of like there's an article that came out with all the people that were already contracted, and then people that like I don't know if they said the matchups or not, but it's already out. I'm pretty sure it's already public, and you know who it is. I would assume, but
I
yeah,
guess
I mean,
I missed that one.
oh yeah, so I mean, we don't make any announcements until the UFC makes it, so we never say anything public, just because we don't want give them a reason to get mad or whatever. Not that
Sure.
I think they will, but yeah, if you just look up the MMA, I think it's MMA Junkie article or whatever. They put out like all the people that are already contracted, and he was on there. So
Okay.
I think it's returning fighter that's been on before, so he's
Gotcha.
fairly easy to figure out. But yeah, we're excited. You know, hopefully we get a couple more on, and I think right now with everything that's going on, I don't think booking the Contender Series is like a huge priority to the UFC right now. I think right now it's just chaos, but
Yeah,
hopefully
no
we
doubt.
get a few more guys on. We've
Yeah.
had success last few summers getting guys on. I think last year we had 5 guys. We got 3 contracts. So think about it. If 100 fighters go on the Contender Series in the summer, I have 5. That's 5% of the roster. For a small agency, that's not that bad. And then to get 3 of the 30 contracts, you're making 10% of the contracts. So I'm pretty happy with that. So hopefully we can have similar success this summer and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, well, keep doing your thing. You clearly are doing a wonderful job for all of the fighters here in New England that you do represent. I know a lot of people here up in my neck of the woods really look up to you and what you're doing. So again, thank you for all that you're doing for everyone around here and helping raise the level of this sport here in New England and nationally for that matter. Stay safe, COVID-19 free. And let's try and talk again before Calvin's fight happens. Let's hope it happens, and we'll do another quick interview.
I appreciate it, man. Keep doing what you're doing. I know you guys are always plugging away. I say this every time. Like you guys, I think sometimes you guys might feel like, oh, are you going to be watching these or is making an impact? But all this stuff makes a difference. Like you guys are telling people stories and gets especially the younger fighters excited. And then once you get them with them, when they're younger and then they get to the point where they're at, where Calvin and Rob are, they're always going to want to do your interview because you guys are boys. So just keep plugging away, keep growing with the sport and keep doing what you're doing because you're telling a lot of stories that will probably fall through the cracks if you weren't doing it.